Hi, everybody. I'm Hasina Moyudin, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here at Peabody College. And thank you all for joining us here today. And I'm very excited to have Professor Rich Milner with us to talk about living and learning in Nashville and Vanderbilt and remembering your why. And I'm going to let him go ahead and start, but we'd love to know more about who's in the room. But kind of given the size of this group, I'd love you to put it in your chat. Just put your name and like how you're affiliated with Peabody so we can kind of see who's here as we begin this conversation. And I'm really excited to have Rich Milner here. He is the Cornelius Vanderbilt Endowed Chair of Education and Professor of Education in the Department of Teaching and Learning at Peabody College at Vanderbilt University. His research, teaching, and policy interests concern urban education, teacher education, African-American literature, and the social context of education. Professor Milner's research examines practices and policies that support teacher effectiveness in urban schools. And his most recent books are Start Where You Are, But Don't Stay There, Understanding Diversity, Opportunity Gaps, and Teaching in Today's Classrooms, Racing to Class, Confronting Poverty and Race in Schools and Classrooms, and The Kids Are Out of Control, Why We Must Reimagine Classroom Management for Equity, and is also heading up the Center for Race Research and Justice. And so we're really excited to have you. Thank you for being here, and I'm gonna just turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Hasina, for the gracious introduction and also for the invitation. I'm really honored by the opportunity to be here. I was corresponding with my good colleague, Nicole Joseph, earlier, and she may, in fact, be on the call, and I'm going to actually rely on her, in fact.
I'm here.
If we might tag team and to support you today, but I am honored to be here. I wasn't sure if I should do slides or not. I tend to overplan, but I really want this to be something that is of use to you and useful to you. If there are questions, if there are things that I don't cover that you wish I had covered or that you want more information about, feel free to email me. I always respond personally to emails. Most of the time within 48 hours. If I don't, give me a couple of days, I will get there. So how many people are here in the room?
So right now we have 45.
Okay, 45 people. Okay, all right, wow. So I won't do a whole lot of cussing today because I don't want what you all think I'm crazy. But I do want to get real, and I want you to be able to pose questions and to engage in ways that make sense to you. So I'll go ahead and start, and then we will just sort of open it up for an open dialogue, if you will. I want to encourage you to tweet throughout, so if you tweet, please tag me here. Also follow me if you'd like, so that I'll know what you are tweeting, and you might follow some of what I'm thinking as well. So I'm really relying on you, colleagues, my new colleagues who are going to be joining us here to tweet. So I've always wanted to be considered a scholar of language and literacy since I began my career in higher education. As a student, it was in my ELA classes that I fell in love with learning. In middle and high school, I was introduced to writers, and in particular, Black writers of the US in 18th century beginning, such as Phyllis Wheatley's A Farewell to America, the autobiography of Malcolm X, Benjamin Banneker's Letter to Thomas Jefferson, David Walker's Appeal, The Confessions of Nat Turner, Claude McKay's My Mother, Langston Hughes's I Too, Zora Neale Hurston's The Gilded, and Margaret Walker's For My People. It was in my literacy classes that I was able to make sense of a history of the US in 18th century beginning. I learned about pervasive struggles against slavery and racism and Black abolitionists and Black nationalists. It was in my literacy classes that I began to make sense of the Black man and the Black woman and the Black person in Civil War and Reconstruction. I shall never forget reading for the first time, and then over and over and over again, Paul Laurence Dunbar's We Wear the Mask, We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile with torning and bleeding hearts we smiled and mild with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise and counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Now, at that time, I was not completely sure what the mask meant. But for me, as a 14 or 15-year-old black male or black boy, the mask represented having to check important aspects of my identity at the door. And yes, even in my ELA classes. At that time, I was immersed in what is now affectionately called hip hop culture. I was listening to the Fat Boys and Dougie Fresh. I'm gonna date myself, right? Y'all like, who in the heck were the Fat Boys, right? I was listening to Dougie Fresh. Y'all remember 6 minutes, 6 minutes, 6 minutes, Dougie Fresh, and you're on. That's when you were supposed to say, right? Y'all remember that?
My daddy played it.
Back in the day, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was listening to MC Light and Queen Latifah and KRS-One and Outkast and Run DMC and LL Cool J and NWA. Yes, niggas with attitudes. I was searching department store dumpsters for large cardboard boxes that my friends and I would take out of the dumpsters and drag back to my parents' house and disassemble them on my parents' patio so that I could break dance on them with precision. But most of the dimensions of my being had to be checked at the door when I arrived at school. Remembering your why, remembering your why. I wore thick, fat shoestrings draped over the outside of my tennis shoes, and I begged my parents for a boom box. And the most of you all probably still don't, what is a boom box? A boom box is a large radio, right? That I would carry on my shoulder from house to house, tuned into V103 or to cassette tapes that I had purchased from my after school job. Remembering your why, remembering your why. But most of the dimensions of my being had to be checked at the door when I arrived at school. And so for me, what I came to understand is that I had to grin and lie, drawing from Dunbar here, to assimilate into an educational system that didn't seem like it was designed for me. Remembering your why, remembering your why. And so what I've come to understand in those moments is that I was being schooled and not educated. Schooled and not educated. And so my challenge to you as we talk and as you move into this next sort of phase of your educational career, and you'll have a great one, is that you embrace the notion of education over schooling. Education is different from this idea of schooling. I want to share with you just a couple of data points here. And on the left-hand side, you will see the proportion of students who are enrolled in schools. And on the right-hand side, I share with you the proportion of those students who experience inside of school suspension. And these data are the most current data from the Office of Civil Rights. And so we see that about 16% of students in schools are Black, but they represent almost 32% of students who experience inside of school suspension. Remembering your why, right? If you look at these data on the left-hand side, again, I show you the proportion of students enrolled in school. On the right-hand side, I show you the proportion of those students who experience outside of school suspension. So again, although Black students represent about 16% of the general population, they represent about 40% of the US population of students who experience outside of school suspension. And some people have a nerve to ask me why I'm focusing on Black students. The first thing is, I always say, is I can focus on whoever I want to focus on. Let me be clear about that, right? And in your work, right, you have the capacity, and in fact, I challenge you to do work that aligns with your why. To do work that allows you to disrupt and to interrupt systems that perpetuate an inequitable status quo. But in order to do that, you've got to know what your why is, and you've got to constantly think about what that why is. There's several big themes here that we could talk about, but one of the things that I want you to remember is Black and brown students are referred to the office for what's known as subjective infractions, and white students are referred to the office for what's known as objective infractions. What do you mean, Rich? What I mean is we have some systems in place, right, that allow these systems to reproduce themselves. And because I know what my why is, my work is committed to building science related to disrupting these areas. So your why, y'all, should wake you up in the middle of the night, right? That's what your why should do, right? There are times when I am lying in the bed and I get up, I have to work, I have to come into my office, right? Because I know what my why is. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Your why will make you think beyond yourself, right? Your why will help you develop an agenda that is beyond your getting a promotion, right? Or beyond your being recognized for work that you're doing. When you know what your why is, you recognize that this work is far beyond you, right? If you knew my story, if you knew more of my story, you would know and you would understand that I sit here not because I'm so great. I sit here because I realize I have a why and a purpose in doing what I do, right? And so I don't have a big ego, right? Some folks do. But because I don't, I'm able to do my work in ways that allow me to be whole and to make an impact. Are y'all still with me? I want some amens out there, right? Your why will make you want to cry sometimes, right? That's what your why will do. Your why, because you care about the communities in which you're serving. You don't see the research participants with whom you're working as simply research subjects. You see them as human beings. You see communities as individuals within a larger system and structures, right? So your why sometimes will make you want to cry, right? And your why also will make you want to dream and reimagine the world. So while I understand things are challenging and grim now, I also understand that things can and they will get better, right? Case in point, when I look at this moment in time and I see the greatness, I see young people coming together, putting themselves at risk of contracting COVID and the coronavirus, standing up, speaking out against injustice. I am encouraged by this idea that things can and they will get better. I imagine a world, right, where we live in an equitable, more equitable society. Your why will make you want to cuss sometimes as well. I tell you, there are days when, and I won't do it today because I'm not gonna embarrass Hasana and the rest of my colleagues here. But there are days when you're well aligned with and connected with your why, when you're gonna want to say some things, right, that your parents wouldn't be proud of, right? Or that my children would look at me like, Daddy, what are you doing, right? But sometimes your why, when you're connected to your why, it's gonna make you want to. Your why will make you want to do something, right? And that is why I'm so excited about the next cadre of students who will join us here, not only at Vanderbilt or Peabody, but also in the work towards improving the human condition. Remembering your why. This is my why. This is, these are my sugar bugs here. And although I work a lot of hours, right? And this is just an example of their being with me in the office one day, almost all for 7, 8 hours. But again, my why. Your why will make you want to do things beyond what shows up inside the classroom. Your why will make you go and pick up a hammer if a hammer needs to be picked up, right? Your why will get you in the broader Nashville community to try to, and these pictures are dated this was prior to my leaving to my leaving Vanderbilt, years ago. But I wanted to find some Nashville centric photos that let you to demonstrate to you that your why has to be beyond sitting in an office, and your why will celebrate itself, right? So, along the way, when you're doing what you are called to do, you're doing what you're supposed to do, along the way, things happen, right? And this is at the endowed chair ceremony here at the university. Who would have ever thought when I began my career in 2001, I would stand with the dean and the provost and chancellor to receive an endowed chair. So I'm going to stop there because I know I've talked a long time, but I really want us to engage with each other. I want you to think about, I'm developing this sort of analytic framework for thinking about how we sort of push back against what researchers call the null curriculum, what's not taught in school, right? And there's sort of an analytic framework that I'm trying to develop to talk about and model for especially young people what protests have the capacity to do, the benefits of protests. So protests have an historical significance, right? They also have an intellectual significance. A lot of times people protest as individuals, but we also protest in the collective as we think about social action and transformation. I'm so proud of my department, the Department of Teaching and Learning, and this is just one example of what protests can do. We had our first Black superintendent in Nashville who was actually pushed out of that position at the end of 2019. And the collective of our department, we decided that we were going to write an op-ed for, led by colleagues in our department, not me, but led by others in our department, who we decided that we were going to speak out in a collective way about our thoughts about why the superintendent was being pushed out. Y'all hear me, right? And so what that meant was these are the names of the folks who signed the protest, right? But that's an example of how collectively, if Rich Milner had written that alone, or if Shannon Daniel had written this alone, or just one person, Louise Leva or Nicole Joseph or whomever, that would have gotten a particular kind of a response. But our collective writing, right, brings about a stronger possibility. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you. And so now I want to open it up for some discussion, questions, answers, and the like. And I can't see the chat, but I will open the chat.
I have a question. This is Rachel Sigmund. We met in February briefly.
Who's speaking? Where are you?
Oh, sorry, Rachel Sigmund.
I'm gonna try to find you.
I'm an incoming student. I think I'm seeing.
That's okay. I just want to make sure. It's all okay. Go ahead, Rachel. I'll find you.
I'll keep flashing. Okay, so I was wondering, some of my colleagues have been talking about this, doing a lot of work in California on wanting to be an anti-racist school and so on, and former colleagues. And one of the questions that we're wrestling with is, you're asked the question, a lot of people want to learn about as much as they can about the history of Black people and Black lives and inequity and equity. But then I have the question of kind of, it's also really important to unlearn certain things in institutions. And so when you think about that, whether it's for yourself or what you think maybe white people should be unlearning, what is the main thing that comes to your mind about, what we need to unlearn? A lot of things I'm seeing are kind of like systems in private and public schools and institutions, and just how those systems are ones that we can unlearn, or how schools or universities or whatever are not fit places for still a lot of students of color. Why is that, and can we unlearn that? But do you have thoughts on what we can unlearn as a society? Or
Yeah, so I like the way you sort of posed the first part of the question. It was around like what white folks can do, and I want to talk about what they can stop doing, and that is, it's this notion that they are expert on everything, right? So, sometimes you just really need to listen and believe the people who are talking to you about their life worlds and their experiences. I'm not talking about you, Rachel. I'm just saying, like, in general. I think we really, when I think about gender oppression, right? I don't know what it's like to be a Black woman or a woman of color, but I can listen, right? I can think about my own privilege and rather than trying to be an authority on every single thing that emerges. And I think that's part of the unlearning process. That's part of the sort of going to the next level process, right? It's about really spending time with people who know and experience the world in ways that you might not. So.
Thank you.
And we don't have to only talk about like issues of inequity. Like, ask me about Nashville, about my life, whatever you all want to ask. Now's the time to do it.
Rich, can we ask really quickly to stop sharing the screen?
Am I sharing the screen? What'd you say?
Yep.
Can y'all see something you shouldn't see?
Could you stop sharing the screen?
Okay, let's see.
No. Just to stop share so that students.
Did I do it? Are you able to see now? Okay.
I'm so glad to be here in this space. Hey, Dr. Milner, I was trying to be in your class, but then I had to work. I'm a teacher. I'm from Massachusetts, so Nashville's real different. I mean, I knew about the South. At the same time, I'm like, whoa, you still talk about that? I thought we was past that. Okay, cool. I knew it, but then it was like, whoa. So from Massachusetts, so a little different, which is going to be a different experience. A Black woman in Massachusetts teaching. I've taught exclusively in urban ed for almost 10 years now. And I just wanted to piggyback off what Rachel said, and maybe you can talk about Nashville in this context. My opinion and my whole experience of teaching, schools, period, in the United States are weaponized to destroy Black and brown bodies, lives, in their whole context. That's just my opinion, but the way it's a colonized education system, and you said that, Rachel, it's not safe places, which I don't think they are. You may have some people who harbor little oases of safety, but in general, especially, approximately 83% of teachers are white women, are white and are predominantly white women. So we don't live in a post-racist society, biases and things of that nature. So I say all that, being a new teacher in Nashville, and knowing the history of Nashville, and even learning, I didn't even know one of the zip codes around here, it's maybe the town over, was one of the highest for incarceration rates. So I wanted to have a conversation about the weaponization of schools and schooling in Nashville, and how it's gotten to this point, because also in conversations with fellow educators, quite interesting, and maybe others will have an opinion, the rigor of students in Massachusetts. And if anybody's ever been there, you can't spit without getting into a school. Like, there's so many schools there. You can go to college, it'll happen, or whatever you want to do. But the rigor of learning is also, I've been told, not as high. It's the requirements for student learning. So I guess that's my question: how the weaponization of education has been really concentrated in spaces like this.
Yeah, you know, and I'm going to invite my colleagues to talk here as well. First of all, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Um,
So glad to be here.
yeah, I'm reminded of, especially in this moment, how silence is used as silence as a weapon, right? And so even though I hear more people now talking about equity and racial justice and anti-Black racism, I still I wonder about those who are silent in these moments and how that silence is used as weapons as well. I think that there are, as you said, pockets of wokeness that you're going to find here in the city, and just like in other places as well. But I do think that we are in situations where, or we're in a situation where we still have a lot of work to do. Other folks on the call who are experts on teaching in Nashville, I want to respect and make sure we provide space.
And by weaponization, I also mean, just to throw this out there, weaponization, I mean like how people are comfortable with the idea of, especially in urban ed, like KIPP schools are really good for this, and Achievement First and all the charter schools coming in and bringing a Band-Aid on it, and yet they're comfortable having classroom sizes of 34 students, which is to me very disrespectful and insulting, because you would never have that. You stretch your educator, and then you would never have that in affluent white communities. Like, you know that just wouldn't be an option. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean as well. Thank you.
Good. And I'm glad you brought up the charter school community as well. Charter schools are public schools, but we know that brings another level of complexity as well. So I'm looking to
I was gonna say, Dr. Milner, that I also think it's important. Nashville has a rich Black history of activism. We have the Equity Alliance. I would encourage you to look up the Equity Alliance. That as a group, there's the Black Educators Alliance. You've got like Black teachers and Black principals here that have been fighting for liberation of Black folks here in the Nashville city for a very long time. I got a few books on my shelf about like some of that history of Nashville. If you ever want to borrow those books, you can do a drive-by and come on and get them. But I also think it's important for us to look for, juxtaposing weaponization, to look for the way that dismantling and disruption has also happened. The Gideon's Army is a group, it's not necessarily connected directly to teaching and learning, but they have been trying to hold like police officers accountable, in this city. And there is an educational piece from that perspective. But yeah, I just want to say that there's a lot of rich, and coming from Seattle, born and raised, where there really ain't no Black people, I am loving the South because I am seeing my legacy and where I come from, and Black people that are incredible and amazing and doing wonderful things in terms of education.
And I think the point, I appreciate that, and I want other people to jump in here as well. There were, I started my career at Vanderbilt here in 2001, and I returned to Vanderbilt 2 years ago. And I can tell you, having lived in other places, it is. I find a lot of joy in being back here. There's nothing like being able to go in any grocery store in the city and you see Black people, right? Or when I think about Fisk and Tennessee State and that rich history, and Jefferson Street, which is, it's gentrifying. but you know, just there are days, and Nicole and I talk about this sometimes, when we just have to drive down the street. We just want to be over there. There's a Kibalon bookstore there. I don't know if you have been in that little bookstore right there on Tennessee State's campus. It's about the size, you know, very, very small space. But every now and then I just have to go in there. And I make sure I buy something, but I just want to be in the presence of Black folk, right? Yeah, in presence of Black folk. And that's not always the case, and that has not always been the case in other places that I've lived. I want to also say that we have these pre-established spaces in Nashville, but I also want to challenge you. Like sometimes there are places, sometimes we need things that are not already in place, right? Based on our own experiences, based on what we're grappling with. And you know, you have a great opportunity to create space where space doesn't necessarily exist. And I can say for sure, and which is one of the points I wanted to make sure I leave you with, is you're coming to the kind of place where you have some of the most engaged, intellectually stimulating minds and thinkers in the world. I mean, right here. I mean, don't sleep on where you are. And I'd also say, utilize not only the resources you have on Peabody's campus, but remember, you're at Vanderbilt University. And so I have a joint appointment in sociology. You know, you can think about Africana studies, ethnic studies, women's studies. Like we have all these wonderful units, formal units right here on campus, from which I strongly encourage you to look to as a resource as well. And if you can't take the classes, like set up an appointment, right? In every class I teach, I have something called writing and reading camp. And once a week, you know, I just open it up, you know, come, hang out, sit, and we sit and write for 2 or 3 hours, read. And that's a great opportunity for people to join us who might not be in the class, who might not be able to take the class formally or whatever. And then the second point I want to make is most of us are very open to your getting reading lists or seeing our syllabi, right? You will have such a rich body, a repository of opportunities here that even if you can't take the classes, reach out to faculty members and look at what the teachers and look at what we're offering, the books we're reading, the articles and so forth, so that you have them as a resource as well. Other thoughts or comments, questions about the journey, questions about Nashville, questions about places to get your hair cut, like what's up? Talk to me, even though I need a haircut.
I have a question. Hi, everybody. I'm Janessa. I'm a second-year EDD student, and I work with a lot of K-12 students and families and faculty and counselors. And similar to Janari's question about the differences that regions bring into play, and I know that Dr. Joseph, you just mentioned, you know, just to having the context of Seattle. In admissions, which is my full-time role, we're tasked to understand the context of not only the city and the region, but also the differences between the schools and the offerings and the systemic ways in which students and their families experience education. And for me, my goal is that I actively, personally pursue more conversations, more literature that's based in systemic racism within the K-12 system, but as a profession across the landscape, it is almost non-existent to the extent that I think we should. And I am curious to know from your perspective and from the faculty's perspective of how one would even navigate a landscape like that when there's not a systemic or cultural awareness to even think about how K-12 is impacting students once they end up wanting to seek post-secondary education. So I know that was long-winded, so I'll be quiet.
Yeah, I think that was an outstanding question, and thank you for asking it. I want to make sure I say, before we get off this call, if you have any interest in joining the distribution list for the Initiative for Race Research and Justice that Hasina mentioned earlier, please send me an email. We would love to get you connected, because the work we're doing there, I think, will allow you to build some important networks, but I also think will allow you to meet in an intimate way people who are working very carefully on thinking about systemic racism from a pre-kindergarten through adult landscape or trajectory. So please send me an email if you have any interest in that. I see improvements, I see shifts in the kinds of readings and the kinds of program offerings that that Peabody and the university are offering. I am starting to see those shifts, and I think part of that shift is a consequence or a result of what students' expectations are. We're in a really profound moment where students are actually demanding something better, or they are demanding something different, right? And so you should be pushing these institutions to move outside of their comfort zones and to stop perpetuating the status quo, to disrupt white supremacy, right? To understand that they too, even in their liberal mode, even in their liberal flag carrying, contribute to white supremacy, right? And so when we point that out and we say this is unacceptable, we are expecting something different, they will find themselves. We're making some progress. The other thing I want to say is there's a it's not a tenet, but it is a central sort of part of critical race theory, and in it it talks about pace, the pace of change, right? And I can say for sure that while I have seen, and I hope I'm getting at your question here, while I have seen some improvement, the pace of change tends to be at the moderate and the comfortable rate of white people's feelings of comfortability. And I'm tired of that crap. So this notion that we need change and we are expecting change and not at your own slow pace is what I'm really hoping that I'm hearing from the students, because we are here to serve you. We are here. It is my job to support your development along the way, and so that's the case for my colleagues as well, right? So I'll stop there.
Hi, Dr. Milner. I'm Lauren Huddleston. I'm an EDD third-year student. I had you way back in 2008 when I was a baby teacher, very beginning of my teaching journey. I'm wondering, you were one of the teachers that really kind of shaped our cohort's understanding of the role of the teacher. And we had you early on enough in our licensure program that it made a big impact. And so I'm wondering what your message is to teachers who are entering the field now, and if that's changed, or if you've honed it differently, especially given the current conversations that are happening and the development in the research.
Yeah. So I will start by saying that in 2001, earlier in my career, we didn't have some of the great minds in our department that we have now. So I just want to say, to be clear, Louise Leva and Nicole Joseph and Ebony McGee, and we just have, from my view, I'm a little biased, right? Some of the best minds in the country, and I mean that sincerely. So I don't want to pretend like I am the sort of guru around or the go-to person around what we should be thinking about related to teaching. I am very interested in teaching in the role of the teacher, but I realize there are many others. Ana Cristina da Silva. We have outstanding colleagues here who are doing really exceptional work. And I hate calling names because I get in trouble when I do. I don't mean to be exclusive, but I just want to say, I think about when I think about my own role and my own thinking about my research, I'm now thinking very carefully about the role of the carceral system in teaching and learning. And so, don't y'all go steal my idea. I'm not going to tell you what my idea is because I know y'all are going to steal it. But I'm thinking very seriously about how we disrupt, if you will, what some call the cradle to prison pipeline, some call the school to prison pipeline. But that is sort of where my work is now. It relates to my why. And I think that work is central to what I've done in the past insofar as I started my work talking about quote unquote classroom management. And so when you think in your work, if you're a true scholar, and I'm talking now to my junior colleagues here who are so gracious to have joined this call, because I'm constantly trying to mentor and be, a model for them as they are for me. But you should constantly be pushing your work and thinking about your work in new and reimagined areas, right? I am not one of those folks who sits here and engages the same data over and over. Like, I want to know more. I want to go deeper. I want to go, right? Hence the Brown lecture that I did. And I pushed myself to really learn and to move into another sort of realm of thinking about the work. So, my purpose in framing a response like that is really to challenge you all here, right? When you enter, you think about how are you entering the conversation, right? And how does your own sort of individual interests push back, complement, nuance, disrupt, complement what's already available in the literature, right? And so good writers read, and good researchers read and write, right? So, that's something that I want to make sure that I remind you of, and build that skill set. Like, build a skill set, because the skill set building will allow you, and that's what's going to sustain you along the way. Like when I started my work here at Vanderbilt, many of my colleagues didn't like what I studied, and they probably didn't even like the way I studied it. But guess what? Didn't matter, right? I was doing my work, right? So just remember, you got to do your work, and you're doing your work. It has to be connected to your why. That's what's going to sustain you when you're tired, when you're worn out, when you feel like you're experiencing racism, when you feel like you're experiencing gender discrimination, when you feel like you're experiencing xenophobia, whatever, or homophobia, or whatever it happens to be, right? Right? That why is what's going to sustain you. Amen. So
Hi.
what am I reading? No, I was going to go. Yeah, jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Tessa Lee. I'm about to start the PhD program with Department of Teaching and Learning. And you talked a little bit about this before, but I'm wondering if you can share more on your thoughts about if you're doing research with communities of color, how do you do that work in a way that is humanizing for those communities and that doesn't kind of reinforce the negative power dynamic that can sometimes come out of the researcher and being researched kind of categories?
Well, first of all, welcome. I'm so glad that you decided to join us, and I look forward to seeing you around and perhaps working with you in your program. Let me start by saying the questions that you are grappling with. Let me see y'all's faces. The questions that you're grappling with, chances are other people are grappling with them too. So let me just start there, right? The question that you're posing now was a question that I was contemplating in 2005, 2006. I don't know what happened, Hasina, when I became the oldest person in the room, but that's okay. But that's right. And so what you're getting at here, right, is this is what I talk about related to positionality. Like, so I was trying to get my head around. Somebody put it in the chat. Thank you, Nicole. But race, culture, research, and positionality. That piece I was grappling with that because I was working with mostly women teachers in affluent in some affluent communities, some urban communities, and I realized that in some situations I was going to be able to provide an EMIX perspective because I do think that the experiences of Black men also matter in the teaching and learning and thinking about teaching, right? So, but I also understood and understand that there were going to be times when the ethic perspective was not going to be good enough. And so it was going to be, and you know what I mean when I say emic and etic? So the emic perspective is that insider's perspective, right? So it is when you come from a community, when you have deep rooted connections with a community, you're able to bring something to that research interpretation, to that research process that people outside of that community just can't, right? But also the etic perspective as well, right? I was trying to really grapple with what it meant to do this work from an ethics perspective as well. And so that's something that I think you're gonna have to constantly grapple with. I think revealing who you are, talking about the messy and murkiness of the research that you in a very honest, way to say that these are the areas that I'm struggling with, but also like listening to what the community is saying, right? People always say, I'm going to give voice to, like, you're not giving voice to people. People have voices, right? But what you are doing is you're amplifying or you're providing space, right, for folks to be able to participate in discourses in ways that they may not have otherwise, right? And so, one of my mentors, Gloria Lasson Billings, said, and I'm looking there at my bookshelf, but Gloria says that we do one or two things in this work, in the book Beyond the Big House. She says that we approach this work as researchers and we study and write about something new, or we write about something old in a new way. And my great-great-grandma would say, ain't nothing new under the sun, really, right? And so it is the ways in which you build new tools, new analytic tools, for instance, that advance and that push us, right? Or maybe you're studying something from a community, you're posing the same kinds of questions to a different set of participants or in a different community, right? So that's what we need to amplify and to advance what we know in the work we do.
Dr. Milner, in your, I don't know how many years you've been in the game now, have you ever had to counsel someone out of the profession of teaching? You had them in classes, you guys have had conversations. I'm curious to know if you have, and if you have, what did that conversation sound like? How did it go? Because there are some people need to just keep on going. Like, right. No, you shouldn't be a teacher.
Right. I can say that I have counseled, I have given good feedback and perspectives for a researcher who, a doctoral student who needed to transition or think about an alternative. And this was a person at a different institution who just wasn't finding and enjoying the work, right? So let me be clear. Like, we want you to, we want you to come in and to become researchers in a traditional way. I'm trying to find the right words here because I know I'm being recorded. But in a very similar way, right? Sometimes it's just not the right work, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have, you have to find your work, right? You know, and the person was saying that he, she, they, like didn't know why we had to write articles and how it was so inconsequential and nobody read them and it wasn't really, and you know, and my point was, okay, there's some validity to what you're saying, right? But if you think because you went to Harvard or Stanford or Vanderbilt or UW or wherever that you're going to get tenure or be able to do whatever the work is, and people are going to change the expectations of what it means to get tenure at these places like overnight because you say so, chances are that's not going to happen. And you work against, you fight against, you speak against, you write against that system, right? But if you can't find any joy in the journey, like, I don't want to be depressed my whole life. I don't want to be down and out. And I talked about cussing related to the why, right? So along the way, you have to find those, you know, I did a piece earlier, and one of my colleagues in the department, Amanda Goodwin, Goodwin, and Bob Jimenez reached out to me to do, to write something for their journal, and I accepted it, right? And I got the piece back to them like very quickly, like within a matter of days, like really hours. And so Amanda wrote back and she said, like, how did you do that? Look, my joy in the work is writing. That's what I do, right? And so along the way, you have to, now that might not be your joy, right? But you got to identify where the place, for some people it is, it's just sitting at the feet of an elder and talking about education. For some people it's standing in front of students and teaching, right? But in the midst of identifying, and you know, we're critical about everything. That's the other thing. Like, well, you're critical about the critical, right? That's the, like, you know, and as a person who takes a critical stance, like there are times when the critique has to move to something beyond the critique, right? And so because I realized that, I think I've been able to advance in my work and my own joy in ways that have kept me whole. Does that make sense? And the other thing I want to say, I need y'all, does it make sense? Thumbs up, y'all. All right. The other thing I want to say is you got to find some homies, right? So you got to look, you know, you have to have some folks, and all your homies can't look like you. All of them can't like for real. You're coming to a place, right, where you're going to meet some of the most intriguing, innovative, outside the box folks in the world, in your life. And whereas some of you are gonna look to university faculty and so, but like, hey, look beside you and build, this is relational work, right? And along the way, these are gonna be your colleagues along the way. Like I tell Bryant, my doc student often, I'm like, Bryant, like, and he's gracious. You know, Bryant is like, oh, you know, Doc, thank you for your, and I'm like, Bryant, look beside you. Like I'm offering something, and I'm a smart dude, let me tell you. But you have among you, right, some outstanding resources, right? And so start early. There, you know, things that I wish I had done. I wish that I had started like writing groups with my colleagues early, like Nicole Joseph and Luis Leyva, and I think of some other colleagues. They get together and they write together, and they're critical partners with each other. You don't have to wait until someone gives you a degree to do that, right? And don't let those partners only and I feel like I'm fussing, but I don't mean to be fussing, right? But like, don't let those people only give you feedback related to the academics, right? Those folks should also fill your cup, you know, in your life in general, right? And so if everybody you hang out with is negative, if those folks never have anything positive to say about you and what you're trying to do, reimagine who those folks are, right? Who's on your team is the question, right? Who's on your team? And I know for a fact, as I look back over my life, I've had people on my team who believed in me, right? People who knocked down doors for me, people who spoke on my behalf when I was not in the room, people who have tried to do me in as well, right? But along the way, right, people have really come to my rescue and come to my defense. And I'm grateful for that. And those are things that you can't make people do. Those are things that happen because you try to do and to be a good person. Iron sharpens iron, someone said. Others. I can't see the chat, y'all, so y'all gotta help me.
A lot of people agreeing with you and really appreciating the resources, and welcome. You guys, remember, you can just download the chat and have all those resources. And we did put Dr. Milner's email as well as his Twitter handle. I don't know, I don't tweet, so I'm admitting that. I don't know how that went.
I better have some tweets.
I would encourage you all to tweet and keep that going.
I tweeted.
That's awesome. Well, this is now something that the EDI office has to look into, is like upping our Twitter game. So we will we will work on that. But also really want to thank you and everybody who came today for this conversation. It's been a great conversation. And we actually do have Luis Leiva next week. So we're excited for him to present and hope you guys can all join us again. I'll be around for a couple of more minutes, but thank you all for being here and for joining us today. And Dr. Milner, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and with us, and we look forward to future conversations.
Fantastic. I have a minute, so hey, if you got questions, let me know.
I'm going to ask you, do you have anything coming up with the race research, the Center for Race Research and Justice?
Stay tuned. We do have a forum coming up.
Okay.
2 weeks. We're just finalizing it, so I'm hoping that people will want to join us via Zoom.
That's exciting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And Bryant Best is on the call. I see Bryant. And you feel free to reach out to Bryant. He's a art student working with us and has great insights about the work as well. I'm just so thrilled to have the opportunity to be here. I really am relying on you, in fact, each of you, to be transformative, to be great, to return to your why, to keep building that why, because we need you. We really do.
Thank you so much. Does anybody want to, any last comments or questions? Thank you again.
All right, y'all. Wave at me. Bye, y'all. Take care. Stay safe. Thank you, Asana. Appreciate it.
Bye. Thank you.
Hasina. And I forgot to say hi. I see so many folks.